All right, it's Friday. We got the Week 11 GPP slate. I have a very special guest, my friend and small field GPP crusher, Pat Kerrane. We're going to talk about this slate, his process for small field tournaments, and also the research he's uncovered this week while writing his great walkthrough column over on NBC Sports Edge. Let's do it.
I suffer from a debilitating condition known as atropic chokitis.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go. Let's go.
I got auto matched with Levitan. This is bullshit.
If I just go the other way in that 6v6, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
Process over results.
Illuminati make a bitch go crazy. I don't know which one of these my baby. Bust down AP, 35 bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch go bust it. And I had 10 pints with me in Russia.
Hey everyone.
They were in the ship chasing Discord earlier, Pat. They were trying to set a line on how much sleep you got last night because, you know, you famously are trying to finish the worksheet by Friday morning. You look like 6-7 hours, maybe.
The walkthrough, the worksheet is Rich Rebar's.
Oh, my bad.
Excellent.
I just had Reeves on
article.
last week. I'm mixed up here.
Well, you know, I'm walking in the footsteps of giants here at NBC Sports Edge, formerly Roto World. You know, that's where the worksheet originated, was of the matchup column over there. So it's a similar type of preview thing where you know, I am burning the candle at both ends and not getting a ton of sleep, trying to get this thing done because it covers every game but the Thursday game. You should take the over, though. I actually got a little over 6 hours of sleep last night, which was pretty good. Pretty good for me on a Thursday. The article's not out yet, though. So, you know, that's it's the give and take there.
I know. I was hoping that it would be out and then I could read it before the show. But what this is going to serve as is just a big spoiler where you get to kind of tease out some of the goodies here before it's released, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna tease some of it, and it will be out very soon. Just editing it, putting some charts in, you know, kind of finalizing stuff. But, yeah, it'll be out this afternoon.
So, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about a few different things. You have been had some really good results in small field tournaments of late, and you even play slightly smaller tournaments than I do. Last week, I did hop in one of those like 200-person spies, which I normally don't get that low in my stuff. So I'm excited to talk to you about that and maybe some of the adjustments you make for those size tournaments relative to like the bigger spy, and kind of want to talk about, similar to what I was talking with Rich last week too, about bridging, you know, the divide between, you know, the research you're doing and understanding some of these spots and matchups, but also then on Saturday night, resetting, looking at the projections and building that way, kind of the blend of the hand builder in the Opto Bro, because is that something you've kind of tried to focus on this year?
Yeah. I've been trying to toss out a lot of the stuff that I find, like, because the numbers don't like it, and been trying to be pretty ruthless with that.
Yeah. And how do you do that? Because I feel like I know, even when I avoid trying to read a lot of stuff early in the week, because I've talked about it on the show. I fall in love with stuff, or you think something's sneaky, and it's really hard to get off of that. So I know I was listening to you talk to Davis yesterday, and you were mentioning that, you know, you put like Travis Kelce on the cover and then realize he's going to be 35% owned and unplayable. I think that is, you know, for the GPP bros, that concept makes sense. But I think for people who don't play a ton of DFS, that's still a wild concept that you could absolutely love a play from a matchup standpoint, but find him unplayable in DFS.
Yeah, and I think that's why DFS is really fun. I mean, it's part of the reason I find it so fun, because it's like a puzzle that you're trying to put together every week. And to me, some of the fun of it is putting Travis Kelce as the cover boy on my column, going, you know, over to the DFS stuff, you know, and to be clear on like my process, I'm deep in the weeds. I'm not really taking in any information on the DFS slate at all. Like, really, to this point, I've gone over to DraftKings and played around with stuff at this point in the week, but I haven't even started digging into like what people think is going to be chalky. Obviously, the Chiefs Dallas game is sort of an obvious, jumps out at you. The AJ Dillon stuff, obvious, but like haven't really dug into that. And also to your point, a lot of that stuff isn't going to be accurate. It's going to change a lot anyway. So I don't really know that my time is like all that well spent if I was doing that. But then when I come out of the walkthrough and it's published, then I go over and, with that Kelce example, you see, oh, Kelce's actually very cheap that week and everyone's going to want to play him. And he's a tight end, and tight ends are, they underperform all the time, even elite ones like Kelce. And you can, make really great lineups by punting tight end and going cheap. There's always really good options. So you just go, okay, I'm glad I have him in season long because he's in a really good spot, but I'm moving on, And I think a lot of this stuff with the walkthrough is I end up with like a big bag full of takes, like there isn't a shortage of leans. Like I come into the DFS slate with like a whole bunch of leans, and then actually crossing a bunch of those off, and I cross, the vast majority of them I'm basically going to be like, that's probably not going to work. That's not going to be helpful. But even if it leaves you with just 2 or 3, that still ends up being really helpful because it can kind of push you towards an idea, help you see something that you might not have seen. And like, that's kind of all you need, I think.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're trying to find that Venn diagram there of plays you like from doing your research, plays that the projections and the ownership likes, and just finding where that overlap is and not forcing ones that are on either of the extremes.
Right. And sometimes the numbers will just love stuff that I think is like, okay. And for me, then it's like, all right, I'm willing to do that. Maybe I won't go super heavy on something that, I didn't love writing up in the walkthrough. Like an example of this would be, there was that Browns Vikings game that was like very popular in the projections, and it ended up totally dudding. And Daigle and I actually had a bet on that where I took the under on that game, and I still played that game a little bit in DFS. I wish I'd played it less. That was one where I wish I'd said, I'm literally betting the under here. I kind of want to go against the projections a little bit because I know the projections are baking in, a game total that I don't really buy. So with that type of stuff, in some ways, I feel like maybe I could go against projections and stuff a little bit more with the leans that I have. But in general, it's more like I'm using the projections to guide me. And then within that, using the walkthrough leans to kind of really push me more on or off stuff within stuff that already rates well.
Yeah, and I know I see Drico asking, if you're using an optimizer, and I think you and I are doing something similar now this year where we've kind of hacked together our own little lineup builders in our spreadsheets where we pull in some projections and numbers and then use that as a jumping off point to almost double check lineups, because you'll fiddle around, see what fits, and then plug it into our own little thing here and make sure that we're not sacrificing too many points, that it's not too chalky, thinking through those things. Am I correct in assuming that's how you've been doing it this year?
Yeah, I don't use an optimizer at all. I use a spreadsheet where I plug things in, like you're saying. I think we have a pretty similar process. And what I will do is I make a bunch of lineups, basically starting tonight through tomorrow. Like I'll just make a bunch of lineups and then I'll plug them into my spreadsheet, and almost all of them rate terribly. Like terribly in terms of the projected ceiling. Some of them will just be like so chalky, like just really gross. But I do that more to just kind of give myself a feel for, what it's like building lineups. Like, for example, I'll be a couple weeks ago, I made a big stand on Deebo Samuel, and he had a good week. That was the week where he had a touchdown called back, so he didn't have a massive week, and I didn't really end up winning me anything. But the reason I took such a big stand on him was that I really liked him from the walkthrough, and then he rated really well in projections and everything, but he was really hard to correlate. That was the week they were playing the Bears. And so, you didn't really want to do any mini correlations with him. And when you built lineups, he just made everything so much harder. So I was like, I love Deebo Samuel. Then I built like 15 lineups and he wasn't in any of them. So at that point, I'm like, he's going to be 1% owned and he's a great play. And I think that building the lineups is really helpful for understanding like who's actually going to get in to lineups, who's actually going to get steamed, and who's going to get squeezed. If you like a guy and you're having trouble fitting him, he's going to get squeezed.
Yeah. The thing that's been frustrating me lately, and we talk about this all the time with just trying to balance, being really familiar with the slate, being familiar with the combos, what fits, where those dead ends are going to be, but then also being able to be really nimble. And the thing I've been struggling with, like a few things I like to do is I do like to run and toss in, projections and run the optimizers and just see what's spitting out. I like to add on the constraints and be like, all right, what are the optimal double stacks with bringbacks, this week, and just see what's spitting out. Like this week, it's all Joe Burrow doubles as far as if you add that constraint onto projections right now. And so I start to get a feel for that. The problem is then inactives hit. We're all busy. We're scrambling. And like in a perfect world, I would get to rerun the optimals.
Yep.
I'd get to go and fiddle with stuff again. I'd get to bring lineups back to our spreadsheet and double check it. But like when the chips are flying Sunday, we just do not have time to do that.
I know. I always like every Sunday, I'm like, I wish I had 3 more hours from like 11:30 to 1. Like we're honestly getting about a third of the time that I feel like is appropriate. Because that's really when we should be building. And I think that's when you'd start to, and I also think that that's where, the true sharps are making an edge. And like, that's where I still feel like I've got so much to learn, where you're just like the instincts of, what do you do when Jamal Williams gets ruled out, and like, I was like, oh, we got to play Swift. And then later it's like, no, like we shouldn't have been playing Swift. Like Swift was still a good play, but he's a receiving back. Like it's not even that helpful that Jamal Williams is going to get rolled out, and it's going to push everybody to him. And there were all these pivots. I think Daigle had identified Jonathan Taylor. He pivoted to Jonathan Taylor that week, knowing that everyone was going to go to Swift, and it was going to specifically leave Taylor as way under owned. And I was like, I mean, that's just such a sharp move that like it really just comes down to like knowing what you're doing without looking at the numbers. And I still feel like I'm getting my feel with that. Like I still have a long way to go there, I think.
So I know, and I actually pulled this lineup up on my Monday GPP review. This was your 10th place finish in the big spy here, but I'm curious, how did you think about this lineup maybe relative to one you toss in a 200 person spy? Because it's something I think about, if I'm in the 800 spy, double spy versus this one that has 4,000 people in it. How are you thinking about kind of the differences or the type of constructions you're more willing to do in the big spy versus the really small ones?
Yeah, the way I've been kind of doing it is the really small ones, I'm willing to sacrifice some ceiling, but I want more correlation, and I want actually to be more contrarian. So like for the spin move, I won the spin move a few weeks back with a Matthew Stafford triple stack and DeAndre Swift bring back. And then I had a contrarian mini in there. And overall, that was a week that Darrell Henderson was chalked. So it was quite contrarian, heavily correlated. You don't need as much ceiling to take it down. But it's just like if people are just wrong about a bunch of stuff and you're heavily correlated, then you're in really good shape, which is, basically all Leone concepts of how I know to play that way. But with the stuff like the spin move, that's more like 200 man, 300 man, then I think I actually want to be more contrarian than when I get up to like the double spy or like the power sweep around 1,000. That stuff I want to be a little bit more ceiling oriented. And then here with this spy, which was, over 4,000, I wanted to be again more contrarian, coming back to the more contrarian plays, getting a little bit more galaxy brain with like a Ramondre Stevenson, where Leone was talking about how you're sacrificing a lot of straight up points when you go Stevenson over Ingram, and then Dearness Johnson's right there too. So to me, I was like, well, that's probably like a bit of a larger field play. To me, this spy is like borderline large field. At least the type of lineups that I'm putting into it is kind of how I'm thinking about it. So that's why I had Stevenson here. I didn't have him, for example, in like the double spy. And then I also built 2 kind of stacks without bringbacks, which is, something I'd probably have a bringback in the 200, 300 man field. So that's probably the biggest things that I'm doing. I mean, I still had the correlated running back defense. I still had 2 different stacks. So I'm building like pretty correlated, not like a ton of one-off pieces, because I don't want to have to get like a ton of things right.
Yeah.
But just thinking about it a little bit differently.
Right. And Drew asking in the chat about kind of the Evans and Howard combination here. And I mean, I think what you were just saying there makes sense. Like in that the super small field, you would roll out a triple stack with a bring back and devote 4 roster spots to a single game. Here, you basically were making like a 3-leg parlay, which was the Josh Allen double, the Zeke Cowboys defense correlation, and the Tampa Bay Bucks offense, right? And then you just had the Stevenson and Dearness plays in there. But it was like, what if I just get these 3 things right in this size field? That still could be enough.
Yeah, it almost was enough. I mean, if Brady actually has a good game, as he was projected to do, and Mike Evans ended up being mega chalk, which I did not see coming. I did not see this coming. I thought he was going to be like 20%.
Yeah.
If I'd known that, I would have gotten off that for sure. But, the comment there was that they were negatively correlated. No, they're not. It's a stack. Technically, if you're playing for like a 1 touchdown, you can vulture each other's touchdowns, but I'm playing for Brady to go off and carry both those guys. But Allen has such a higher ceiling than Brady that I can probably still beat the Brady stacks with a Tampa Bay stack in such a nice matchup. I thought Brady was going to have a really good game.
Well,
but I've got Diggs Sanders with Allen, so you essentially trying to do 2 stacks in one lineup.
Yeah, and I would say too, as far as like the negatively correlate, we have to be both price and positionally sensitive to that. Like if you were playing, Evans and Godwin together, and Godwin costs that much more at a very valuable position, and then Brady's not in there, then it starts to not make sense. But you can punt tight end. If there's one position you can punt at, he was 2,700, and you are actually getting kind of the correlation. We talk about this a lot, right? It's like the difference between a macro and micro correlation. Do they have the micro play correlation? No. When Evans does good on a specific play, Howard doesn't. But they have the macro team correlation that when the offense crushes, there's a high likelihood that 2, 3, 4 of those guys could all succeed.
Yeah, exactly. And the cost point, Godwin and Evans, then you need Brady, because it's like if both those guys are doing enough to hit their salary, then you're going to need, they probably you want 2 touchdowns from both of them. So you want Brady. But here it's like Evans has like 1 more long catch, gets the bonus. I'm good. Howard gets in the end zone. I'm good. I think I would have won the spy. Like if that happens, if Evan gets the bonus and Howard scores a touchdown, and then Brady, he throws 2 touchdowns, that's not enough. I'd still rather have Allen.
Yeah. And Michael asked a question, and we've talked about this with Holka a decent amount when we're building some of our FanDuel lineups for Tilt Space. He says, would you say this is more DK specific? Would you ever do OJ Howard Evans without Brady on FanDuel? And one thing we've talked about is that, first of all, FanDuel is way more touchdown heavy. So the kind of opportunity cost there is greater in that correlation hits you more. Whereas OJ Howard could have had 4 catches for 60 yards and you're already kind of cooking there. Whereas he does that on FanDuel and you're probably sunk. So I do say that kind of move is much more FanDuel or DraftKings specific. Plus the savings on Howard relative to other positions is so much greater on DraftKings compared to FanDuel, where the tight end pricing is so much more jumbled up together.
Yeah, I don't play on FanDuel. I just have I just need focus to be able to do anything well, and to split up kind of my thinking on, how I'm approaching FanDuel versus how I'm approaching DraftKings. I just want to be laser focused on what I'm doing in DraftKings. And then I'm splitting that up between, different size tournaments. And so if I'm kind of thinking through different things, it's how I'm approaching the 200 man field versus the 4,000 man field. I can't really handle FanDuel on top of that. So I don't know. I actually don't know what the answer
I was just going to ask you that too, because I think for me, I don't feel like I'm smart enough to just have my brain just kind of quickly react to the different, scoring formats, and just like, I don't know, I just am better when I hone in on a specific thing. And my guess is you kind of feel that way as well this year, of like, because you are very much focusing on the same type of tournaments week after week. How valuable do you think that is to just kind of know the texture and the type of lineups that your competition is going to be rolling out each week?
Yeah, I think it's really valuable just to understand, like, when I'm building lineups and I find a good lineup, I'll tag it right away. Like this, oh, this looks like a really good lineup for the spin move, or this looks like a really good lineup for the big spy, or whatever it is. And, I'm not playing like the exact same thing every week. I'll kind of mix it up. I always play the spin move, and I always usually play something in kind of like I almost always play the double spy, which is 833 entrance. And I try to keep most of my stuff at most to 1,000 or below, but I feel like the sweet spot for me is like right in that like 750 range, right? Or even maybe a little bit lower. Kind of just depends on how I'm feeling and how that week sort of lines up. But yeah, I think doing like similar types of field sizes each week is really important. And I'm not venturing out and like firing stuff into even like the Engage 8, which I played last year. I like that tournament. It's a nice $8 3 max, but it's so much bigger. I think it's like 15,000. And like my kind of big galaxy brain thing is the spy. Like that's what I've decided. Like I'm just going to do the big spy if I have like galaxy brain ideas that I want to fire. But a lot of times I might just do like, the smaller one that's like around 1,200.
Yeah.
And so I've probably only played the 4,000 man spy, like I think twice or three times this whole season.
Yeah. This question here, I think, is a good kind of transition to, how you think about, stuff like ownership and correlations as it pertains to kind of the research you were doing. And I know you were in our chat on Sunday and you were mentioning how much you thought the Dallas pass rush was going to give the Falcons trouble. And then obviously you like the spot for Zeke there as well. How did you think through that? Was it the defensive running back correlation, or was it that you kind of just liked those spots and prices for them individually?
I liked them both individually. I had Zeke and the Cowboys individually in other lineups as well. But that is a correlation that like me and Leone did a podcast, Establish the Edge, last year on correlation, and he kind of ran through all the numbers on these various correlations. I would recommend going back and checking that out for some of them, because I was asking him those exact questions, like what about like tight end and defense? Are those correlated? Apparently they're not. But what about running back? Can we do that? So there's lots of different, and there's other really good content out there on the correlations, but defense and running back are correlated positively. Now, like in the 99th percentile outcomes where you need the running back to just score like 40 points, the defense scores a touchdown that robs the offense of a possession. That's not ideal. But I mean, what happened with the Cowboys last week is the exact reason why defense and running back are correlated. You get, the Falcons absolutely imploding and Zeke's feasting on them, and the defense is going off. Now, I did like the Cowboys defense because I thought the pass rush might give Matt Ryan trouble, and I thought he had kind of done well against some good defenses with weak pass rushes and had not played well against some teams with good pass rushes. So I was like, the fact that everyone liked that game as well. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. I'm kind of like lukewarm about this. Everyone loves it. Sure, I'll bet against that. But then, of course, they score a punt return touchdown. So it's like you also got to be lucky with this stuff too. It's not like, I had any thoughts on their punt rush.
And I mean, last night's the perfect example, right? The same spot, a defense that was going to give the Falcons trouble, and the Patriots defense absolutely smashed. But if they were on the main slate and you had used a Patriots running back, well, neither Damian Harris or Ramondre got there last night. So even though over a large sample, they correlate, it's not necessarily going to play out that way because there is so much variance with the touchdowns there. Let's let's kind of transition here now that you are kind of emerging from the lab this week on the walkthrough. I'm kind of curious, just, right off the top of your head, kind of some of the spots that are interesting to you. Maybe I can cross-reference it here with some of the updated projections and ownership, and we can kind of start to feel out this slate.
Well, one thing that jumps to mind is like how chalky is the Chiefs Dallas actually going to be? Because I would say probably like one of my biggest leaks this week or this season has been that like the chalk game that gets identified on Monday or Tuesday and then like doesn't end up being that chalky, but I just get anchored to the idea that it is going to be chalky and then I don't play it a ton. So I'm worried that like, are people actually going to play the Chiefs a ton and Dallas a ton? It's one of those games that's actually pretty attractive. So I feel like people are going to play it, but is that chalk that we should be pivoting? Because I have a pivot idea, but can you just help me out with, do I need to pivot off this game or not?
So would it blow you? And obviously it's early in the week. We haven't gotten all, I know, Adam will do a finesse run on the ownership projections, generally later tonight or early tomorrow morning. And so we'll get kind of more sentiment baked into the initial ones. But would it blow your mind if I told you every single relevant Dallas skill position player is projected for less than 10% ownership right now across aggregated ownership?
Yeah, that would blow my mind.
That's
so we don't
the case.
pivot. We just, yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. I'm sitting here, look, I'm seeing 6% on Dak, Mahomes at 12 and Allen at 9 being the two popular guys. I'm seeing CeeDee Lamb at 4%. I'm seeing Amari Cooper, where are you? 9%. I do see Tyreek Hill up at 17%. You see Kelsey at 12%. So it seems like people are wanting to play it that way, at least initially. Schultz at 6%, Gallup at 7%. I mean, some of this has to change, but I think the reason the numbers are kind of bearing this out right now is, one, the Bengals look really good in optimals. Jamar Chase is underpriced and T. Higgins are both underpriced for how they've been playing. And then on top of it, you have these Green Bay guys. I mean, A.J. Dillon and Devontae Adams are projecting so well. And so I feel like the push and shove here is, are people going to game stack and go after that game, or are they just going to play these best plays in these other spots?
Yeah, and one thing, like just from building a little bit, I was like, it feels like a pretty tight slate pricing wise. So it's like it's going to be hard to get away from Dillon and Ingram if we get them, because like that was my first instinct of like, man, it's sort of tough to find savings a little bit, and obviously if you're stacking up the Chiefs game, that's going to be a little bit expensive. So. All right. I mean, I guess this is the thing of like, we've pivoted so many times that you can literally just sit back on like Tuesday and be like, well, the best game of the week's the Chiefs Cowboys. Everyone's going to talk themselves out of it. Let's just stack that.
Yeah. And it is, I can see, I have a feeling when we do our, GPP lineup reviews on, Tilt Space and my show on Monday, that there's going to be some weird ownership that goes down because of that Bengals Raiders game being so attractive too. And because if we head into that 4 p.m. and it's ambiguous and it's like, my guess is public sentiment will be, oh, you pivot to Bengals, that's your pivot off that chalky game. And I could just totally see T. Higgins being 40%, Jamar Chase being 25%, and then all these Cowboys coming in and like, 10 to 12% again. I mean, I could definitely see that happening.
All right. Well, I'm gonna plan to have some Cowboys then. The Cowboys stuff's interesting. I was gonna talk about a pivot off of this game, but this is so funny.
No, I want to hear both. Yeah.
The Cowboys are interesting, I think, because particularly if Lamb's not going to be heavily owned, like the Gallup return, I think might be bullish for Lamb. It's hard to know for sure because he only ran a route Lamb on 59% of dropbacks last week. But he did run more routes than Gallup, and it was a blowout, so we don't really know. But there's a chance here that he's going to play in the slot in 3 wide receiver sets, which there's not a chance that he is. We saw that. But then that he might stay on the field in 2 wide receiver sets ahead of Gallup. And if he's in that type of role, he's just going to be the clear wide receiver 1 on the team and someone that I'm not afraid of with the the targets getting a little bit more spread out with Gallup and Cooper. Gallup and Cooper are definitely going to be more inconsistent. I think Cooper a little bit more reliable, as everyone else does. But I would say my big lean on this is that like the Dalton Schultz panic button seems to have been triggered here.
It is.
And I'm very willing to go against that. He ran a route on 81% of dropbacks last week, despite the blowout. He's had a 72% route rate on the season, even though he's kind of had to work his way into the role. That's a really nice route rate for a tight end on the year. He was only targeted twice last week. He went 1 for 14, but he's been targeted on 19% of his routes this year. He's earned a role, and I think we're going to see week to week inconsistency with Gallup, with Cooper, with Schultz, a little bit with Lamb, and we saw it last week with Schultz. I think this was the first week it happened to be Schultz that got cut out. I'm like, okay, you don't want a tight end who's probably going to run like 80 to 85% of routes against the Chiefs in the highest total game of the week, getting targets from Dak Prescott. You don't want that. All right, cool. I'll take it. So, I mean, to me, I think I want to include him in pretty much all the Dak double stacks if he's going to be like super low owned, because you get tight end correlated. Kelsey, probably be fairly popular, I would assume.
Yeah.
And then, I probably go on Lamb in most of those, but like, I'm still feeling it out. But Schultz is someone that I've kind of got circled right now. If I'm going the Dallas stuff, it's just a really nice way to get tight end taken care of, and you're like super contrarian. And I think he's like a pretty decent play. Like, he's like tight end can always fail, but he's got a nice ceiling, and I think he's going to be like really nice leverage.
Yeah, I agree with that. What on the Dallas side or on the KC side, obviously the big three are going to be popular. What do you think about Darrell Williams with CEH potentially back? What do you think about Byron Pringle, who has kind of started to lap, Hardman, at least for that, that role? Do you like any of these ancillary pieces?
I mean, Williams is tough because like you're not getting a ton out of the backfield, so you just want it condensed. So if CEH is back, I think I'm off both. Pringle is interesting. He ran around on 67% of dropbacks. Josh Gordon was at 39%. Mecole Hardman down to 33% last week. And Pringle has an ADOT of 14, where Hardman's been used a little bit more underneath. So if we're getting an ancillary guy on the Chiefs, these guys aren't targeted a lot. Pringle's been targeted on just 13% of his routes. He's not someone that we can really count on for targets, but he can get, 3 targets and pay off because he's got that deep ADOT. So, of the kind of, I call him a hazardous but viable dart throw in the walkthrough.
Okay, that makes sense. What about, what was I going to ask you here? Oh yeah, what was your pivot? If that game, if we do see that getting a ton of steam and we're needing to look elsewhere, what did you like?
I really like Kyler if we get Kyler back this week, because
And it sounds like we will based on practice reports.
I think we will, yeah. And the Seahawks are pretty interesting because in EPA allowed per dropback, they rank 12th. So they're like a pretty good pass defense. But they have this really weird schedule where they've played these super run-heavy teams. The Titans, the 49ers, the Saints, the Vikings were all bottom 10 in pass rate over expected. So they're just not facing that many pass attempts. And then they've played these like kind of balanced teams to the slight run heavy teams in the Colts, Steelers, and Jaguars, but all of those teams have inefficient passing offenses. Then they played the Packers, who have a good passing offense, an efficient passing offense, and are pass first, but they're super slow. So it's like they like really are not logging a ton of passing attempts against them, and the passing attempts logged against them are generally not by hyper efficient offenses. And even the ones like the Titans, it's like you're seeing more from the Jaguars than the Titans. So the Rams are the only team that they've played with a formidable end pass first offense that isn't super slow. So to me, it's like they could just be a total paper tiger in terms of a pass defense. And if Murray's healthy, and the target's a little more condensed with Hopkins out, he could be a really nice stacking option.
Yeah, what I was going to ask, who would be your preferred kind of stacking option? Christian Kirk's price is a little pricier than we've seen him normally, up here at 5,700. None of the other guys are popping that much. AJ Green at 4,600, and God, Rondell Moore 4,200. Who would be your preferred way to attack that? And don't say Zach Ertz.
I'm glad you asked, Pete, because I think it's pretty clear double stack where you go Kirk and Ertz, because Kirk has had 97% route rate and then 91% over the last 2 weeks. Target rates at 21%, 25%. He played primarily on the outside in week 9 because AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins were both out of the lineup. But then last week, he's back in the slot for 72% of snaps, but still the clear wide receiver 1 running route on 91% of routes. And you saw AJ Green at 77% of routes in week 10. And right around actually lower than where Antoine Wesley was. So if Kirk's playing ahead of Green in the 2 wide receiver sets or ahead of Wesley, but more importantly, just on the field, and he's in the slot, then I'm really interested in Kirk. We saw Rondell Moore way down 34% route rate in week 10. So, Kirk is Cliff Kingsbury's decided he wants Kirk in the slot over Rondell Moore, even if it means playing Antoine Wesley on the outside instead of Moore in the slot, which is annoying, but really good for Christian Kirk. So I like him a lot. And then Zach Ertz, he's had route rates of 87% and 83% over the last 2 weeks. If Hopkins is out, I think he's a full-time tight end in an up-tempo pass-heavy offense. He also has a 1.83 yards per route run with the Cardinals, which is pretty good. That's his best showing since 2018. I call him a shamefully exciting correlation play in the walkthrough, and I think that sums it up.
Yeah, and I do think it sets up pretty nicely there because James Conner is going to be really chalky. He's underpriced at 6,100. So going to the passing game there, and then Tyler Lockett is going to be pretty chalky. It looks like at 6,000 because he's underpriced here. So, I mean, something like that with a DK Metcalf bring back starts to look pretty nice to me.
Yeah, although I guess if the Cardinal stuff isn't going to be all that chalky, I don't mind bringing back Lockett. I think Lockett and Metcalf are both set up. Like you kind of need to just pick the guy who gets hit for the 1 or 2 big plays in this game, because the Cardinals are really good at stopping deep passes and big pass plays. They're second to only the Bills in fewest 15+ yard passes allowed this year. So, it does feel like a coin flip. And honestly, you could probably, if Lockett's going to be chalky anyway, you could probably just not bring it back and just run a Kyler double stack, because, both those guys are on the cheaper side, and you got the Kyler rushing equity. So they might not really need to be pushed. So I wouldn't eliminate Lockett due to the chalk. And Metcalf does feel like a little thin at his price, but certainly in play.
Yeah. Nick was asking about Cam Newton here. I didn't mention him with some of those top end quarterbacks earlier, but I am seeing him as, being in the top 3 or 4 most popular QBs. I'm seeing about 10% ownership. He projects pretty well at 5,100. He does look like the best points per dollar QB play right now. I'm curious your thoughts, Pat, on it seems like both Cam and Jalen Hurts could be kind of strong candidates for naked QB options if you're trying to game stack, in other spots. Does that intrigue you at all?
Yeah, I guess are people going to play McCaffrey?
I'm seeing him at about 16% ownership right now. I think my guess is most lineups will kind of decide between a Devontae Adams or a McCaffrey in them. I think he'll be owned, but I doubt he gets over 20% just at that price tag and with all the good high-end options.
I'd rather prioritize McCaffrey than trying to go. And I think those guys are definitely negatively correlated, because you're really, worried about the Cam Newton goal line role. But Ben was talking in stealing signals, how McCaffrey had a ton of opportunity around the goal line and could have had a really big day. I think Cam Newton's totally fine, though. I think a single stack to DJ Moore is in play as well.
Yeah, talk about DJ Moore. We love DJ Moore. It's been kind of rough scenes of late with so much turnover with the quarterbacks there, but now he's under 6,000. I think it's the first time since week 2 he's been this cheap, you feel like we can go back to him here?
I think so. I mean, you're looking at a Washington defense that, they played well against the Bucks, but they just lost Chase Young to a torn ACL, and rushing the passer is the only thing they did well. They're 29th in PFF's pass rush grades. They're 25th in EPA allowed per dropback. So it is a really good matchup for the passing game here, even if we have Cam Newton and maybe it's a little bit lower volume. But Moore has an elite target profile still, even though he's cooled off recently. He's run a route. He's been targeted on 25% of his routes. He's a 10.8 ADOT. That's an elite target rate for that ADOT. Run a route on 93% of dropbacks. He just has a 7.6 yards per target, which is not good. And he had, over the last 2 weeks, he's had a 5.3 yards per target. He was at 3.4 against the Cardinals. So, that yards per target will kill your fantasy production, but yards per target is the least sticky of any of the things that we're looking at. And I think in general, yards per target can be somewhat helpful because if a guy's just producing nothing when targeted, it can affect his playing time. But this is not one of those cases. DJ Moore's playing time is not going to get affected. He's clearly the number one guy. He was awesome early in the year. They know that. They understand why his efficiency has been down. It's due to the quarterback play. So all we're betting on is that DJ Moore has a spike week in efficiency, a per target efficiency, which happens all the time, in a really good matchup. And that they don't just go completely in a shell with Cam Newton the way that the Patriots did at times. So there's definitely downside risk, but you're playing GPPs, you're looking for the upside. I think a single stack to Moore makes sense.
Yeah, no, I do too. And he's cheap enough at 5,900 that, I mean, those two combined for what? It's like 11,000 in salary to do that stack, which is pretty nice there. We mentioned how the pricing's pretty tight again on the cheap end. I'm going to just toss out some names of kind of the better points per dollar cheap wide receivers that we haven't talked about yet. And if any of these guys maybe check out from some of your research, we mentioned Byron Pringle. I'll toss in MBS. I will toss in Marcus Johnson. I will toss in even Donovan Peoples-Jones. Anything in here standing out as a viable play?
I would steer clear of Marcus Johnson personally. His routes were not particularly high. I believe he was at 60% routes run last week. 60. He ran around 60% of dropbacks. Westbrook Akine was at 50%. Chester Rogers 37%. Des Fitzpatrick at 23%. Like, to me, that looks like a mirage there. I would avoid him. Marcus Valdes-Scantling was also splitting time with Lazard and Cobb, not running as many routes as I hoped he might. So not really into him. I think Pringle's viable. Who was the last guy you mentioned?
Who I think I mentioned DPJ. He's a little pricier at 4,500.
Oh, his routes were up last week. So he would be a little bit more interesting, but you're dealing with a Cleveland team that could just go ultra run heavy this week, and like we'll have no problem beating the Lions if they go super run heavy. But he was up to 87% route rate last week. He was only at 65% in week 9. So, that's nice. And then he has a 17.0 ADOT. So, he can get there on a few targets. He only has an 11% target rate this year, which is like bad. So, you're just do you want to bet on one long DPJ touchdown throw? Because that's your bet. And I think like you can, I basically made that bet in some lineups with MVS. Like, I think it's like totally fine, but it's fairly thin.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. Staying on the Titans though, I do think it's kind of interesting here. Jeremy McNichols has still been missing practices. It seems like he's trending toward being out. Donta Foreman is really cheap at 4,900. AJ Brown is pricey, but is definitely going to be the lowest owned of those, top 5 or 6, wide receiver plays up there. Justin Jefferson will be the lowest owned, but AJ Brown will probably come in next up there. Do you have any love for this spot? I'm trying to talk myself into Donta Foreman and AJ Brown being the arbitrage AJ Dillon and Devontae Adams on this slate.
I feel more confident in Brown being the arbitrage Adams than Foreman being the arbitrage Dillon, because we just don't know with like the snap share stuff. I mean, even if McNichols misses with the concussion, right, then you've got Peterson potentially. Like, What if they just say, okay, Foreman's in the McNichols role and Peterson consolidates the Foreman-Peterson role? Like, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I don't know what they're going to do, which I guess gives you some upside, but it's like already kind of such a thin play. And like, there's a lot of opportunity costs with burning one of your running back spots on Foreman. So I'm a little bit nervous about him. He's more of like a guy that I'd be psyched to like throw into season long lineups. Not to say like I wouldn't play him at DFS, but it's definitely gives me like a little bit of a queasy feeling.
Yeah.
AJ Brown, I think, is in a really nice spot. Houston is like kind of this interesting team because they're just so bad that teams just like want to go home. And the quickest way to do that is just like pound the ball against them and get the game over with. But they're better against the run than the pass. They rank 16th in run defense grades, dead last in coverage grades. They rank 7th in EPA allowed per rush. They rank 29th in EPA allowed per dropback. They're like actually quite a bit better against the run, and they're terrible against the pass. So if you have Tyrod Taylor like playing a little bit better, which he probably won't because this is actually a pretty bad matchup for him, but if he pushes like just a little bit, or the Titans just come out and decide we want to get a lead quickly, and the way to do that is actually through the air, through AJ Brown. Our strengths are now to pass the ball. Then you could see like some big play action plays to AJ Brown to get the lead quickly, and then they probably will salt away the game. But the matchup, in a way, is good here. It's just you're just like deathly afraid that the volume might not be there. But the volume is not always there with the Packers because they play so slow. So as an arbitrage, Devontae Adams, I do think he's viable.
Sweet. Yeah. So if we're not doing Donta Foreman, are there any of the cheap running backs, say sub 6,000? We can toss out, Mark Ingram. Obviously, if Kamara doesn't play, he's going to be a good play. But, some guys that look like they might be a little popular. David Montgomery seems to be catching some ownership right now. I mean, Antonio Gibson is coming off a good game. We could potentially have a Jeff Wilson game without Eli Mitchell. Anything down here interest you?
Jeff Wilson definitely would. I'd be more interested in Wilson than Foreman. Just because I think he's able to consolidate that role. I also think Wilson's pretty good. I think that they've trusted Wilson in the past as well. He's clearly behind Elijah Mitchell last week, played 23% of snaps. Mitchell had 61%. He had 27% of the attempts. Mitchell had 73%. But I think he consolidated a lot of that work. And this play basically sets up as like you're looking for touchdown equity in this matchup. This is a spot where they should be able to beat the Jaguars. They should be playing from ahead. You generally do beat the Jaguars through the air. They're a pass funnel, and they're worse against the pass than they are against the run. But they're also bad against the run. They rank 20th in EPA allowed per rush. They're 22nd in PFF's run defense grades. They're like totally exploitable. So, even though most teams would choose to beat them through the pass where they rank 28th in EPA allowed per dropback, they're terrible. The 49ers might be like, well, why don't we do the thing we do better against the thing they also can't stop? Right. You could see like Jeff Wilson get rolling in this game. I think he's pretty appealing. Foreman, like I don't want to like say Foreman's like completely off my board, but I would definitely take Wilson over Foreman. I think if at equal ownership.
Yeah. The Eli Mitchell stuff is weird. He hasn't been practicing. Shanahan still sounded somewhat optimistic, but maybe in a too optimistic sense. So it'd be fun if we got a Jeff Wilson Jr. game here. Let me see. There's one other thing I was going to ask you about before we built a lineup here. We can do this one. Yeah. We could talk maybe, we mentioned Schultz, we mentioned Ertz. Everyone knows the top end tight ends, Kelsey, Waller, Kittle, all look solid. Anything down here in the cheap tight end range? Again, I can toss out some numbers here. Mathology references Komet. Njoku doesn't look awful to me. Maybe a Dawson Knox here goes overlooked. Anything down here in the cheap range stand out to you?
I like Dawson Knox a lot. I think, he's another case where like he dudded last week, but like overall this like Beasley snap rate stuff where Beasley's like, I think clearly dealing with this ribs injury still, regardless of, whatever the injury report says. That's really good for Dawson Knox. And then you have this other dynamic where the Jets just let the Bills do whatever they wanted. And what they wanted was to throw the ball to Stephon Diggs endlessly and have him rack up targets because Stephon Diggs is awesome. But I think the Colts will put up more of a fight. And so if that is the case, then Allen will probably have to check down a little bit more. And, that I think sets up Dawson Knox pretty well if Beasley's still limited. So he's pretty interesting. Kmet, I'm not like super, super interested in. One guy that, if you want to talk about gross tight ends, we got this guy, John Bates, we might have starting in Washington. And I will have John Bates in the lineup. They're talking about, there was a beat writer quote where they were like, he's not as fast as Ricky Seals-Jones and Logan Thomas, but like he's pretty good at catching the ball. Like they've played their tight end on, like 85, 90% of routes, like every week dating back to last year. Like this is the system. They just have a tight end who runs. They call these plays that must have just tight end routes built into all the plays, and it doesn't really matter who's out there. So you have an offense that doesn't really have a secondary weapon, except for the tight end. It doesn't really matter to me. Like he has like less than 600 receiving yards in a 4-year college career. He's a 4th-round rookie. Bates is definitely going to get you a 0, but that 0 will open up other stuff in your lineup at 2,500. And if he doesn't get you a 0, oh boy. So I think I'm genuinely kind of interested in punting it off.
I love it.
With Jonathan Bates. The one thing on Kmet that I'll say, he has run cold in yards per target. He has 6.8 yards per target this year, which is pretty bad. And so, he is probably more viable than I was initially giving him credit for, just as a potential bounce back candidate if Fields can get it, together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was my best. What was it? It was the Chiefs Raiders showdown slate from whenever that was recently, and my best lineup had a 0 from Dylan Stoner in it. So sometimes it's the thesis of the play is who it allows you to get, not the points.
Play the main slate like it's showdown. Let's go.
That's right. Hey, I mean, you finished top 10 with the Howard Bagel. Our best tilt space lineup last year had the Adam Troutman Bagel. If there's one place you can take the 0, it is definitely tight end.
I actually wonder if taking the 0, like obviously it's not optimal to take a 0, but like
you get a galaxy
just the fact
that
just the fact that it's like so like that it doesn't kill you more than it does. It's like just tight end just like not matter. Like should we just almost play it like I will not play tight end to therefore play like just better players at every other position. Like there's it feels like there's something to that idea where if you just can get anything from these punts, you're already set up to smash.
Yeah, because of late it's like you could pay 6,100 for Darren Waller's 9.4 points, or you could pay 2,500 for Bates's 2.3. It's like what do you want to do? All right, let's build a lineup here. We got to get you on your way so you can wrap up the walkthrough and get that out to the masses. What do you want to start with? You want to? I'll let you knock off a few spots, a stack or a place you're really liking.
Where's Schultz at
for
What's
ownership?
No,
let's run price, he's 4,600. Yeah.
Let's run the Dak Schultz Lamb double.
Yeah. I like how you've gone full Silva, like on a salary. What's the price? What's the price of that guy?
I have. Yeah, that's totally.
All right. Yes. And I will, you said, so I guess the question here is obviously if we're running a Dak double, we need a chief.
Yeah, we need a chief.
And so then the question is, I kind of want to do wide receiver. I don't really want to mess with the Darrell Williams. He's looking popular. There's uncertainty there. So the question really for us is like Tyreek Hill or Pringle, right? Should we save money with Pringle? Or premium it?
Let's premium it.
Okay.
I want to see how I want to push it and see how gross this gets.
Yeah. I'm going to put a default defense in. The defense who looks kind of best to me right now, just from like a price upside ownership standpoint, is the Eagles. And if we need to go down to save a little bit of money, we can. You're probably going to have to give us a cheap running back here.
Well, like with the ownerships that you stated, like, can't we play AJ Dillon?
Yeah, we can. And And we'll be
I
able
guess he's not cheap
to.
enough for. We probably need even someone cheaper.
We probably. I mean, do you want to try we can pencil in a Wilson for right now?
Let's
Jeff
pencil in a Wilson. Yeah, I believe Mitchell's back-to-back DNP, so we'll see. We'll see today, but.
So yeah, this is gonna we are gonna need a punt, wide receiver down there. This might get tricky. This might get tricky. Double tight end, as Drew suggests, might also be an avenue we would have to go here.
Yeah, we don't have a ton left. What kind of minis are sitting?
We might have to go. We could just game stack this and go toss in Pringle and
let's toss in Pringle and see what that leaves us.
And then that gets you up to 4,800, which appears to be a fairly gross range here.
Which is Zach Ertz's exact salary.
Oh my God! Can you imagine a double tight end Zach Ertz?
This Ertz Schultz. Let's put it in the millie.
I will say, I mean, we didn't talk about the Bengals at all. I mean, Chase and Higgins are going to be incredibly popular. Do you have anything nice to say about Tyler Boyd?
No, I don't. I think Higgins is a really nice play in a vacuum, and there you go. That's like when they say the title of the show in the show.
That's right. Be sure to check out the audio version of this podcast on In a Vacuum later today.
So yeah, I think Higgins is a really nice play, excluding ownership. I think Chase is a really nice play. I do think the Raiders pass rush is really good and could kind of ruin that. Also, the Raiders are a run funnel, and we have seen last week or last game, the Bengals were not super pass heavy, breaking the recent trends. So they may take the bait on that run funnel. That's a game where if it's going to be like super chalky, I don't mind on betting on that one to fail. And that's like kind of a nice thing about the walkthrough. I think doing the research is like, I don't have like a strong lean on how that game's going to go, but I'm like, this game looks like it go either way. And then you come in and you're like, everyone's like betting it to go one way. It ends up being very easy to be like, okay, I'll just take the other way. I think the Bengals kind of lines up like that. I don't know that I want to kind of pivot to a Boyd piece, and then I'd rather just bet on the game to fail.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the chat was asking for Foreman earlier. We talked earlier about why we weren't super high on Foreman. I did move down from Eagles to Washington defense to see if that extra money would help us.
What if could we do a Cam DJ Moore single stack?
And then just
do like a game stack without the expensive quarterbacks, and then do like a single stack.
Yeah, let's see here what that does. Cam or I mean, yeah. So then, I mean,
you don't even need Pringle. Then we could do something else more interesting than Pringle.
We could go. I mean, you mentioned Kirk. Like Kirk is pretty good one-off, I would think.
Yeah,
that's too much. I actually don't mind the Pringle and then going to like getting up to Titans D, who no one is going to be playing this week at these prices.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The other good defense Browns up here at home versus Detroit, but that extra 800 doesn't get you a ton up from Pringle.
Well, if you leave Pringle in, maybe we could take like Jeff Wilson up to something.
That's true. Yeah, let me go back down to like Eagles, and then if that would give you an extra. I mean, that gets you up to Connor, and then you can.
Oh yeah.
And then this is a lineup you could pivot off of pretty easily. Like Connor to Josh Jacobs is actually going to be a pretty clean pivot.
Yep.
So this is one after the show, I definitely want to toss in the spreadsheet and see how this is looking. But to me, this is one of those ones with fairly barbelled ownership, because Dylan, Connor, and Tyreek are going to be very popular. And so will Cam. But I don't think Moore and Schultz and Eagles and probably Lamb, based on right now, I don't think those guys won't be very popular. So I think this checks out to me as a solid lineup.
It feels pretty solid to me. Yeah, I think having like some of those like really low on plays are kind of what get you there more than the spread out stuff, right?
Yeah. And the other thing I kind of like about that pivot to the Cam thing is you just getting that information early. And I do think the DJ Moore, like if you get the DJ Moore ceiling game, like you're really ready to cook with this Dallas KC game. If DJ Moore bombs, then you're moving off of the Dylan and Connor stuff, most likely, even maybe messing around with it just to get off that chalk.
Yeah, but you've got the KC game stack, so you could easily take that to a Cardinals stack, and then that gets you off the Connor chalk. So I think there's sort of a natural pivot.
The chat has all kinds of suggestions of how to improve this lineup. Here is the link to hop in the Deposit Kingdom Weekly League. You can choose your own adventure. Toss that lineup into the Rake Free contest. Looks like right now, I'm guessing this will fill by Saturday afternoon. If we keep on our current pace. I did just see confirmed on Twitter, DeAndre Hopkins officially out this weekend. So your Christian Kirks and I guess Zach Ertz's are looking fine. Pat, tell people where they can find the walkthrough. You obviously tweeted out here. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
So my news shift starts right now. So I'm going to jump over and I'll be kind of editing in between news breaks. So we should have it out here in the next couple hours. Hopefully get it out by around 3.
Awesome.
And it's over at NBCSportsEdge.com.
Definitely read it. I highly recommend making that part of your process. Check out Pat as well on the Good Football Show. He appears on that a couple times a week. Really good stuff with our friends over at NBC Sports Edge. And you can check out Pat and I, if you guys are season long bros, we are live every Wednesday at 9:15 p.m. Eastern on the Ship Chasing channel, talking about our high stakes season long teams and also kind of getting into the weeds on some of these situations that I think is actually pretty helpful for kind of showdown in DFS strategy as well. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. I have 2 more shows this afternoon. I'm going to hop on with Mike Zakarian from Team Hold here in about 10 minutes. And we're going to talk through the Owners Club strategy for week 11, if you guys have been messing around with that. And then at 2:30 Splash Play, we are having special guest Cooter Doodle on. Looking forward to that as well. So thank you to Pat for joining me. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Good luck in week 11.